Nine luckiest people who survived the impossible. It's number two, but I've never seen any of these, so we're gonna check it out. It's by Echoes. They're at 228K, 2 million views on this video, so I'm assuming it's gonna be interesting.
Submerged in the ice-cold water under a thick layer of ice. But still conscious, the skier's body temperature dropped to a record low of below 14 degrees Celsius. The woman had no chance of survival, when suddenly, her pulse got going again. In this video, I'll share 8 incredible survival stories that are hard to believe. Viewer discretion is advised. A British parachuting instructor, Michael Holmes, was preparing for his 3rd jump in a day. He double-checked his gear and had his colleagues recheck it for him. Michael had around 7,000 successful jumps under his belt. On that day, in 2006, the instructor was supposed to film a tandem flight over the New Zealand town of Taupo. When the plane reached an altitude of 4,600 meters, the skydivers jumped. Michael circled the tandem couple to take the best photos and then opened his parachute. However, instead of a steady descent, the man got caught up in a violent swirl. His main parachute got tangled and wouldn't open. So, the man detached it to open the extra one. Its canopy wouldn't detach for some reason though, and Holmes continued falling. He wanted to cut off the suspension lines with a knife, but was unable to raise his arms due to the speed of the fall. Michael barely managed to look at his altimeter and realized he was done for.
Oh, he's gonna land in the water?
6 more seconds passed.
No way.
Michael Holmes hit the ground. But when Michael's friend landed nearby, he saw Holmes lying in a blackberry bush, fully conscious. The man was immediately taken to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with a crushed left foot and ankle, on which he landed, as well as broken ribs and a punctured lung. But if Michael had fallen directly onto the ground or into the water from such a height, he would have most likely died on the spot. It was a coincidence that saved his life, but no bush will save you if you've crashed inside an active volcano. In November of
What? I mean, he landed in a bush, so
1992,
no shit, you can't
cinematographers
land in a
Michael
volcano.
Benson and Chris Duddy went to film a volcanic cone named Pu'u'o'o on the Hawaiian Islands. One of Hollywood's best pilots, Craig Hosking, agreed to take them to the mouth of an active volcano. But the moment they approached the crater, the helicopter started falling right into the volcano. Everyone on board was preparing to die. However, by some miracle, the helicopter didn't end up plunging into the fiery lava. Instead, it fell onto the hard ground. Moreover, the people remained virtually intact in the air crash. The scene of the disaster turned out to be located in the very spot where fresh air was flowing into the crater. Otherwise, the men would have choked on the poisonous gases produced by the volcano. These coincidences saved their lives. Apart from that, they were only 90 meters below the crater top, so things didn't seem that bad. It was an illusion, however. When the men tried to climb the slope, they got badly injured by the spiky hot stones. Moreover, the lightest touch made the stones shift, so the people were at risk of falling into the boiling lava every second. The thick gases and vapors stopped the men from seeing anything, so they soon lost track of each other. Pilot Craig Hosking miraculously managed to get back to the crashed helicopter and call for rescuers. The rescue team, in its turn, was just as lucky to notice and pick the pilot up on the same day. Benson and Duddy, on the other hand, were stuck on the wall and spent the following night in agony, listening to the sounds of lava boiling at 1,000 degrees Celsius beneath them. On the following morning, Chris Duddy dared to climb higher, but Michael Benson deemed it too dangerous.
They were
and stayed where
recorded
he was.
doing this?
A
What?
few hours later, something like a human body swooshed past him and fell into the lava. The
No.
man got overtaken by despair. He was barely holding on upon a tiny ledge, convinced that his friends had died and that he was going to follow suit. Benson spent 2 days without food in the pouring rain. When the man felt he just couldn't go on anymore, a rescue net suddenly appeared near him, lowered from a helicopter. Moreover, Benson was told that all his friends were alive. The thing that flew past him the day before was a rescue package thrown from a helicopter. Chris Duddy had safely climbed out of the volcano 27 hours after the crash. So, it turns out that a string of coincidences can save your life, even when the laws of physics are
No,
stacked
yeah,
against you.
that's
A
luck
worker
right there.
from England managed to win a battle against a machine that even the Terminator would have lost. On the day before Christmas 2008, a man named Matthew Lowe was working his factory shift. He was passing by an automized conveyor belt when he noticed his overalls get caught on something. Then, a horrible thing happened. Lowe fell onto the conveyor belt, which started pulling him toward a 13-centimeter opening in a structure. In just a few seconds, the man's entire body disappeared into the narrow tunnel. Only his head remained outside on the other side of the machine. The only thing Matthew had the time to do was to hear the cracking of his bones and think this was the end for him. The machine spewed Lowe's broken body out on the other side, but the man remained conscious. Then,
that is insane. Oh my God. I would want to die probably at that point.
the horrific pain kicked in, and Matthew started screaming. When the other workers ran into the room, they froze with terror. Lowe's back was broken in 2 places. His pelvis, ribs, and both hips were almost completely crushed, and the abdomen, with the internal organs, was torn. Matthew was immediately taken to the hospital, and his partner was advised to prepare for the worst. However, despite all the doctors' predictions, Lowe fought for his life, spending a month at the hospital and going through 6 surgeries. The surgeons literally stitched the man's body back together, and in just 18 months, Matthew could return to work, although he was transferred to a different position. The only things reminding him of the catastrophe are the weakness in his right arm and occasional panic attacks. Lowe's story fully deserves to be recreated in a sci-fi movie. Regarding a case that happened to Stephen McCormick,
no, I would not
it
want to
already
see
happened
that.
on screen. On May 21st, 2011, in the town of Opotiki, New Zealand, Mr. McCormick, an experienced driver, was tinkering with his truck. He was right between the car's bumper and a trailer when he slipped and fell. But instead of regular pain, he felt his body blow up like a balloon, getting twice as big. The man's colleagues and his grown-up son came running when they heard his screams. As it turned out, McCormick had fallen onto a brass valve that supplied compressed air to the car's brakes. It punctured the man's buttock, and the pressurized gas entered his body. McCormick's colleagues managed to cut off the air supply and laid the man on the ground. However, as it turned out, the only 2 emergency cars were busy, and Stephen had to spend an entire hour waiting for the medics. When the man got to the hospital, it became clear that the air had separated the fat tissue from the muscles and filled the entire space in the abdomen, the chest, around the lungs and the heart, and even behind Stephen's
blown
eyelids.
up like a balloon.
The doctors had to push a hose between the ribs right to the lungs so that the man would be able to breathe. The air in his body had to go out the natural way, which took 3 days. After this, McCormick was discharged from the hospital completely healthy, and the only reminder of the incident was a puncture in his buttock. The doctors noted that if the valve had hit any other body part, it could have damaged a blood vessel, and then Stephen McCormick would have died. The man was saved by a total coincidence and couldn't have influenced the situation in any way. A tourist from Australia, on the other hand, had to decide whether he'd fight for his own life or not. On a Sunday morning in September of 2019, a 54-year-old man went on a short hike to Mount Nebo near Brisbane, Australia. Neil Parker was a seasoned member of the Brisbane Bushwalkers Club and took all the necessary gear with him.
That guy Neil.
Moreover, he'd repeatedly walked that same route, so the thought of telling anyone where he was going didn't even cross his mind.
Good
1
job,
hour
buddy.
and 40 minutes into his hike, he had already started a familiar ascent onto the mountain near a waterfall. Yet for some reason, the normally reliable rocks suddenly started shifting under Neil Parker's feet, and he plunged downward. The man fell 6 meters into a shallow creek, snapping his left leg in half above the ankle and crushing his left wrist. Neil tried to get his cell phone out of his pocket, but it slipped into the water. Then Parker realized he could neither call for help nor expect to be searched for. His only option was to get out himself. Neil used his hiking poles to splint his leg and started crawling. It was so hard, however, that he had to rest after every meter he conquered. Yet Parker continued crawling, stopping from time to time to eat something and take painkillers. Only 2 days later, on Monday, when Neil Parker didn't show up at work, the search operation began. By some miracle, someone recalled the man mentioning his plan of going to the mountains. But a helicopter wasn't dispatched until Tuesday morning. Quite soon, The rescuers noticed a man in a creek bed. He was waving something colorful over his head. As it turned out, not only did Neil Parker survive, he'd also climbed for over 3 kilometers from the spot where he'd fallen. He was hoisted aboard the helicopter and transported to the hospital. The doctors admitted that making a splint out—
Is this, I don't even know, like, who's recording him from the bottom? Like, is that actual footage, or is that just something that he found on the internet and just like, hey, you know what, this matches the story?
of hiking poles was a genius idea. Here's what I think. Neil Parker's situation was horrible, but he had immense experience, food, and painkillers. 28-year-old James Grimes, on the other hand, had to get out of a similar plight without even firm ground under his feet. On November 23, 2022, a man got aboard a cruise liner in New Orleans to celebrate the upcoming Thanksgiving. After sundown, James had a few cocktails and decided to go to the bathroom. The next moment, the man regained consciousness only to find himself in the boundless waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Grimes started panicking. He couldn't recall falling off the ship and didn't know what to do. At first, the man hoped his absence would get noticed soon, and the lion would come back to get him.
There's no
But
way.
after spending the entire night in the water, he realized it wouldn't happen. During that time, a large group of jellyfish badly stung James's body, and when the sun rose, new trials awaited Grimes. He noticed a fin nearby and went pale with terror. A shark was approaching him. Then something touched his foot. He kicked it hard, held his breath, and prepared to die. But nothing happened, and the shark, if it was one, never returned. Suddenly, James saw 2 ships on the horizon. He swam toward them for hours, thinking of his 9-year-old daughter and coming up with songs for her. All the while, the ruthless sun was burning Grimes' skin. And
Just imagine, you know how hard it is to swim for hours? Swimming for hours, that is exhausting. Just swimming in general is something exhausting. But having to do it for hours, the adrenaline.
James had
definitely
already
kicks in.
spent 20 hours in the water and was losing hope of ever seeing his family again. A lifeline landed near him. The man used all of his remaining energy to try and grab it, but the mighty waves did not allow him to. Eventually, a Coast Guard helicopter started circling over James, and rescuers took hold of him. One of them noticed that Grimes had 1 minute at most before dying of hypothermia in the ice-cold water. But I don't think this is the most incredible story in this video. Do you believe it's possible to get caught in a storm at a cruising altitude and survive? On February 14, 2007, in the small Australian town of Manila, a world skydiving champion, Eva Wisniewska, was preparing to defend her title for the nth time. The sky was absolutely clear that day despite forecasts of a violent storm. However, when the woman took to the sky, the weather quickly deteriorated and clouds appeared around her. Eva directed her paraglider under one of them when suddenly she felt a fierce, invisible force get a hold of her. At a speed of 20 meters per second, the woman was flying upward, right into the storm's epicenter. This is a natural phenomenon called cloud suck, when the warm air from beneath suddenly rises to the cold air. First, Eva only saw lightning bolts around her, and then she was completely covered by the pitch-black darkness. The abrupt pressure change caused the woman to go unconscious. She couldn't feel the hail hit her while the 50-degree frost was covering her skin with ice. In the end, Eva was sucked onto almost the cruising altitude of a jet plane, 9,947 meters. There's so little oxygen there that the human body starts literally dying cell by cell. For Eva, this meant almost 100% certainty of death. Yet, almost an hour later, the woman came around and realized she was now hurtling toward death on a paraglider that was out of control. At some point, Eva's descent speed reached 33 meters per second, but suddenly, the fall slowed down, and the athlete managed to land only 60 kilometers away from where she'd started. The woman's entire body was covered in bruises from the hail, and she had severe frostbite on her face, ears, and extremities. Wisniewska's survival has been compared to winning the lottery 10 times in a row. It was nothing short of a miracle. However, I've saved the most incredible story for the very end. Not even doctors can explain how Anna Bagenholm managed to come back to life. In May of 1999, a Swedish radiologist was skiing in the mountains near Narvik in Norway. She was an experienced skier, had been on those slopes multiple times before, and was accompanied by her 2 colleagues. Yet none of this spared her from a tragic coincidence. On that day, Anna lost control of her skis and fell. The woman landed on her back in a frozen stream, broke 20 centimeters of ice with her head, and her entire body sank into the water. Only Bogenholm's feet and skis remained above the surface. Anna's colleagues immediately rushed to help her, but failed to get the woman out of her ice trap, so they called the rescuers. Panicked, Bogenholm was thrashing against the ice when suddenly she managed to find an air pocket nearby and start breathing again. She spent 40 minutes like that, fully conscious and awaiting rescue.
40 minutes.
However, she never managed to see it. She passed out, and her colleagues were unable to tell whether Anna was still alive. Yet the rescuers took another 40 minutes to get the woman out of the water. So, she had no chance of survival. When Bogenholm was brought to the hospital, her body temperature had hit a new record low in the history of medicine, 13.7 degrees Celsius. A few hours the doctors spent trying to resuscitate the woman yielded no results. However, in the cold country of Norway, medical practitioners have a rule: to warm the patient up before declaring their death. So, a team of over 100 specialists worked in shifts for 9 hours, trying to bring Anna's body temperature back to normal, when suddenly her pulse reappeared. This seemed absolutely impossible, but the doctors weren't too quick to be optimistic. Bogenholm had been dead for too long, and the human brain experiences irreversible damage after 20 minutes without oxygen at the longest. However, Anna spent the following 35 days connected to a ventilator and regained consciousness. It's incredible, but no damage was found in her brain, yet the woman was paralyzed below her neck. 29-year-old Anna was aghast at the idea of spending the rest of her life bedridden and was very angry with the doctors for having saved her at all. However,
what? I mean, I guess I could understand that, but you know, they're not gonna just let you die.
after another month in intensive care and lengthy rehabilitation, Anna Bogenholm had an almost complete recovery. Most people who go through hypothermia don't survive, even if doctors manage to get their heart going again. What happened to Anna is a medical miracle. I've told you so many stories like this that I wonder sometimes, can they be explained away by a miracle?
A lot of these are like miracles, man.